plays and theater scripts. Whether in partnerships or at the workplace, this particular form of manipulation comes to light again and again, in which the victim is made to believe that something is wrong with his or her perception. Political regimes or cults may also take advantage of this practice to gain control over the minds of their followers. In many cases of child sexual abuse, gaslighting is used to cloud memories of the experience and create emotional dependencies. However, gaslighting also repeatedly affects individual population groups or minorities in society as a whole. For example, it can also be found in the manifestation of racist and sexist structures. The perfidious aspect of this manipulative tactic is that doubts are regularly sown in the victim, gaslightee, about his or her own ability to perceive things on the basis of a relationship of trust over a longer period of time. In most cases, this process will have a lasting effect on the affected person's self-esteem and leave damage, the consequences of which the victim will often have to deal with for years to come. However, the perpetrator, gaslighter, is not always aware of his manipulative behavior. In particular, gaslighting can occur more frequently in certain clinical pictures such as narcissism or sociopathy, without the gaslighter being aware of the toxic effects of their behavior. Consequences of gaslighting. Gaslighting acts like a creeping poison that slowly but surely attacks and breaks down the affected person's self-confidence. The feeling that one can no longer rely on one's own perception creates insecurity that gradually extends to all areas of life. As many gaslightees develop the fear that they may have gone mad, they withdraw from their social life and try to cope with the situation alone. The more the problem continues, the more drastic the consequences become. Depression, anxiety, paranoia, and feelings of alienation can occur. If these patterns are not recognized and broken in time, lasting psychological damage can result. In particular, people who were affected by gaslighting in childhood often struggle with the serious consequences throughout their lives and are often at risk of falling back into such relationships as adults. How does gaslighting work? A basic prerequisite for gaslighting is that a relationship of trust exists between the perpetrator and the victim. Only on this basis is it possible for the gaslighter to make the gaslightee believe, through his targeted manipulation, that he perceives reality in a distorted way and is imagining things. Thus, the gaslightee's confidence in his own perception gradually diminishes, and he often feels an increasing pressure to justify himself to the gaslighter. But the more the gaslightee tries to defend himself, the more dependent he becomes on the gaslighter's reaction. All attempts to regain the gaslighter's recognition turn into the opposite. A power imbalance develops. Once this mechanism is set in motion, it is difficult to break through again. The gaslightee feels an increased desire for security, which he seeks in the gaslighter's portrayal of reality, which the gaslighter can in turn exploit to sow further doubts. The less the gaslightee feels that he can rely on his own perception, the stronger his dependence on the gaslighter's portrayal of reality becomes. In many cases, the gaslightee's dwindling self-esteem and fear of having gone mad cause him or her to withdraw from social contacts outside the toxic gaslighting relationship. An effect with fatal consequences, since an exchange with outsiders or friends could often help to reinforce confidence in one's own vision. Not infrequently, however, the perpetrators in gaslighting relationships even go so far as to persuade their victims that the entire environment has long since recognized that they are crazy and are only pretending that everything is fine with them out of pity. Increasingly, the gaslighter gains control over the gaslightee's thinking until, in the worst case, the gaslightee finds himself completely unable to think clearly on his own and finally becomes completely dependent on the gaslighter, constantly telling him what is right and wrong. Excursus, the Stockholm Syndrome. Stockholm Syndrome describes a psychological phenomenon in which victims, usually of kidnapping or hostage-taking, develop a positive relationship with their perpetrator. In some cases, they even fall in love. Similar to gaslighting, the complete loss of all security ensures that the victim trustingly places himself in the hands of the perpetrator because he represents the only fixed point of reference in the new situation. The term Stockholm Syndrome originated from taking of hostages during a bank robbery that occurred